When you think of radiation, what comes to mind? Possibly green glowing light, cancer, or maybe the hazards of nuclear war. In modern society, the term radiation certainly carries connotations of danger and harm. When it comes to radiation in spaceflight, many have pointed out that it's a hazard for the human exploration of space. A region known as the Van Allen belts has been of particular concern. It's where concentrated radiation travels high above the Earth, which we will delve into further in this video. Some argue that the Van Allen belts would have made missions to the moon impossible due to the dangers of the belts, with some even pointing to comments made by NASA in 2014 as proof of this. So which is it? Would the Van Allen belts really have stopped us from going to the moon? And did NASA really say we hadn't overcome the challenges of the belts back in 2014? Well, let's break this down and find out. To begin, we should first explain what radiation is, as the term, like many others in science, has been diluted by colloquial usage. Radiation, more specifically the ionizing radiation we'll be discussing, consists of either energetic particles or high-energy electromagnetic waves, capable of knocking off electrons from atoms. Three notable factors of radiation are the frequency of each wave of radiation, the mass of the particle being emitted, and the dosage received. Radiation is essentially everywhere, at all times. Space isn't the only place with radiation. Your walls emit radiation, your food emits radiation, even you emit radiation. The two most commonly experienced types are infrared radiation and visible wavelength radiation. Here's a fun fact too, since we're talking about radiation. I'll let you in on a little secret. If you live in an older home, say built and furnished before 1990, there's likely a nuclear isotope in your home right now. Literal nuclear material, likely hiding in plain sight. And I'll tell you what it is at the end of this video. Hint, it's not your microwave. Infrared, also known as heat, is released by an object as a result of work being done. Mechanical systems try their best to reduce infrared radiation, as that's energy lost to heat that could go towards the machine's function. The specific kind of particle radiation that can hurt you is ionizing radiation, that being alpha particles, beta particles, and gamma waves, with each posing a different hazard to space-going astronauts.
Alpha radiation is a large charged particle that consists of 2 protons and 2 neutrons. These particles can travel only 1 to 2 inches in air and are easily shielded by a single sheet of paper. In fact, alpha particles will not penetrate the outer layer of skin cells on your body, so they are not considered an external hazard. However, if a material that emits alpha radiation is taken into the body, it can, because of the close proximity, cause damage to body tissues. For this reason, alpha radiation is considered an internal hazard. Beta radiation is a small charged particle. Beta particles are much smaller than alpha particles and can travel up to 10 feet in air. They can penetrate into the skin layers and are considered a skin and eye hazard. But they can also be an internal hazard if a material that emits beta radiation is introduced into the body. Beta radiation can be shielded by plastic, aluminum, or several layers of clothing. A firefighter's turnout gear or bunker gear will provide some shielding from beta radiation. In general, alpha and beta radiation are associated with contamination. Neutron radiation is a neutrally charged particle that can travel several hundred feet in air. Neutron particles have a high penetrating ability and can penetrate through the body. Therefore, they are considered a whole body hazard. To shield neutron radiation, high hydrogen content materials such as water or plastic are used. Gamma ray or X-ray radiation is an electromagnetic wave or photon rather than a particle. Because gamma rays and X-rays have no mass and no charge, they have a high penetrating ability, are able to travel several hundred feet in air and penetrate through the body. They are considered a whole body hazard. Very dense materials such as lead, concrete, or steel are used to shield gamma and X-ray radiation.
Now let's turn to the radiation in space. Radiation primarily comes from stars, supernovae, and more locally, our sun. Stars emit a range of particles as a result of the nuclear fusion they undergo. These cosmic rays are mostly high-energy protons and electrons. Turning to the Earth, our planet has a massive core of nickel and iron. The liquid outer core circles underneath Earth's crust. As a result of this circling motion, it emits a large electromagnetic field. This magnetic field is a torus, or donut shape. The magnetic field can capture and direct charged particles along its field lines. As Earth's magnetic field captures and focuses this stream of radiation, it creates a dense region of radiation higher than deep space. This was hypothesized to exist by a professor from Iowa by the name of Dr. James Van Allen. These atomic particles travel along these field lines, bunching up in a region of denser radiation known as the inner belts, and a less dense region known as the outer belt, with all these particles focusing and dispersing at Earth's magnetic poles, resulting in the northern lights.
Good Lord, what is happening in there?
Aurora Borealis?
Aurora Borealis. At this time of year, at this time of day, in this part of the country, localized entirely within your kitchen.
Yes.
So that's what the belts are. But what is mankind's experience traveling through it? Now, some might jump to start investigating the Apollo missions, but the Apollo program was not the first times humans traversed the belts, which is something I'll explain shortly. Before we get into the history, I want to note the minimum dosage required to experience radiation sickness is 70 rads. That's the point where you experience ill effects from radiation, the onset before higher doses become lethal. So for crews to be in lethal territory, it must be higher than that. Another important factor to consider is the typical radiation dose we experience on Earth. Americans will experience around 0.3 rads or 0.3 rads of radiation in a year. For those undergoing medical treatment, a normal dental x-ray will subject you to 0.5 millirads, while a full-body CT scan can result in levels as high as 2 to 3 rads. Another point worth noting is that radiation isn't like a bullet from a gun or being cooked alive. What matters with radiation is the dosage, or in other words, how much radiation is experienced and the duration of that exposure.
There are three types of occupational dose equivalent limits, or DELs. The first is the cumulative lifetime dose equivalent limit, or the CLDEL, and the limit is based on the technologist's age. For each year alive, a technologist may accumulate up to 1 rem, or 10 millisieverts of dose. For example, a 25-year-old technologist may accumulate up to 25 rem, or 250 millisieverts of dose. This does not apply to minors, as the occupational limits do not apply to those under 18 years of age. This dose limit is meant to protect over the long term. Action is required if a technologist reaches their CLDEL. The prospective limit is in place to restrict doses early in our careers when we are younger, and the CLDEL doesn't limit our exposure to a reasonable dose. The prospective limit allows for 5 rem, or 50 millisieverts per year. This dose can be averaged over time, and action is recommended if the limit is reached, although not required. There is also a retrospective limit that looks at doses over a year to ensure that a radiation worker is not accumulating a year's worth of dose in a short amount of time. The limit for a retrospective dose is 3 rem, or 30 millisieverts per quarter.
A closer example of the hazards of radiation is something like smoking. Even if I smoke 100 cigarettes in one day, aside from potentially experiencing extreme nausea, it won't kill me.
You are gonna smoke this entire carton. Something. Come on, only 1 pack left.
I think I'm gonna barf.
That's what I wanted to hear. Good job, son. When you're finished, you want to get that with a hose?
But if I smoke 10 cigarettes a day for a year, I'm more likely to develop lung disease and other illnesses. This is similar to radiation. A short burst of high intensity isn't guaranteed to be fatal if it's below extreme levels. but those who are around radiation daily have a low level they're permitted to experience. Above that, the cumulative dose could become hazardous to them. So that said, let's turn to the space missions handling the belts. The first manned mission to cross the inner belt was Gemini 10, crewed by John Young and Michael Collins, launched initially from a Titan II rocket. The crew then met up with a previously launched Agena spacecraft. It then fired its own engine, lofting both vehicles to an apogee of 408 miles, or 756 kilometers. The crew wore dosimeters across their body that were connected to the spacecraft's telemetry system, so Mission Control could monitor the radiation levels in real time. 3 months later, Gemini 11 would travel even higher, to an apogee of 854 miles, or 1,374 kilometers. Wearing the same radiation dosimeters, both missions traversed the inner part of the radiation belts. In the end, the data revealed the highest level of radiation was experienced by Gemini 10 as a result of the crew passing through a unique part of the Van Allen belts, known as the South Atlantic Anomaly. The South Atlantic Anomaly is a portion of the belt that drops unusually low. While the inner part of the belt sits around 620 miles or 1,000 kilometers, the South Atlantic Anomaly has its peak intensity around 310 miles or 500 kilometers. It currently is above the eastern coast of South America, though it moves along with the Earth's core, so its location and strength vary over time. Gemini 10 experienced a peak of 0.91 rads and an average of 0.76 rads, while Gemini 11 peaked at 0.04 rads and an average of 0.03 rads. The simple change that enabled NASA to cut the radiation exposure was simply changing course to avoid the South Atlantic Anomaly, enabling NASA to keep both missions well within survivable limits. But trajectories are only part of what enables NASA to overcome the radiation hazards above Earth. The design of the spacecraft also plays a part in how they overcame the belts. When it comes to radiation, the most common response for protection is lead, but that doesn't work so well in space. Denser atoms like lead can end up emitting secondary X-ray radiation when reacting to beta particles in a process known as the Brimstrong effect. But after the Gemini program ended, the Apollo program began, consisting of 9 missions to the Moon and 2 missions in Earth orbit. Apollo measured the radiation absorbed by astronauts wearing a dosimeter throughout the mission. The spacecraft also had a dedicated dosimeter used to measure the radiation from the Van Allen belts themselves. The 2 missions in Earth orbit would be Apollo 7, the first crewed mission of Apollo spacecraft, and Apollo 9, a mission to test nearly every element of the Apollo system, but in Earth orbit. Apollo 7 averaged around 0.16 rads, while Apollo 9 received 0.2 rads on average. Research indicated that astronauts faced approximately 0.001 rads every hour spent beyond Earth's magnetic field, meaning over the course of a 1-week mission just spent orbiting the Moon, the crew would experience up to 0.68 rads of exposure, while someone on Earth spending their time exclusively outside would receive 0.012 rads. If they stayed there, they would receive approximately 8.7 rads over the course of a year. Thankfully, the longest Apollo mission was around 12.5 days during Apollo 17, meaning they received 0.3 rads during their 12.5-day journey, 0.02 rads for those of us on Earth. The crew received 0.0006 rads per hour while standing at the lunar surface. Apollo 17 was also the longest time a crew had spent on the lunar surface at 75 hours, adding around an extra 0.45 rads to Eugene Cernan's and Jack Schmidt's radiation dosage. This resulted in Apollo 17 having the 3rd highest radiation dosage experienced by Apollo crews. Apollo 14 experienced the highest average radiation during their mission at 1.14 rads, with Apollo 12 being the 2nd highest at 0.58 rads. The reason for Apollo 14 being so high compared to the rest is due to the trajectory taken to reach the Moon, being closer to the equator and as a result, the denser regions of the belt. Despite this increased dose, it's still far below lethal. There was one solar event that occurred between the April 1972 launch of Apollo 16 and the December launch of Apollo 17, which would have resulted in a notable surge of radiation if a crew had been in space during that time. It's predicted that if a crew had been operating in cislunar space at that time, the crew in the more shielded command module would have received up to 360 rads directly to the skin, and around 35 rads directly to the crew's vital organs. Such a dose might not have been fatal, but it would have absolutely triggered an onset of acute radiation sickness in the crew. However, if the crew had been in the lightly shielded lunar module, the results could have been much worse. Apollo was not the only time radiation was measured in deep space. In 2011, NASA launched the Mars Science Laboratory, which included the massive Curiosity rover. To reach Mars, its destination, Curiosity would have to sleep for 253 days, but the rest of the vehicle did not sleep. The Radiation Assessment Detector, or RAD, slowly kept measuring and keeping totals on how much radiation the vehicle experienced on its journey to Mars, to inform NASA, who wanted to send Mars-going astronauts and wanted to know how much radiation they would experience when we send people to Mars. The device measured 466 millisieverts of radiation during its trip, or roughly 46.6 rads. Spread across its 253-day journey, that gives an average of 0.184 rads per day. That's more radiation than what Apollo experienced during a 1-week trip to the moon and back, but in one day. While that exposure in a single day isn't fatal, it rapidly accumulates in a crew during a hypothetical future mission to Mars, causing much of NASA's concern about radiation over the last few decades. In just over a year, such a crew would reach NASA's maximum lifetime limit for a single astronaut of around 600 millisieverts. The increased radiation measured changes as the sun goes through its solar cycles, of solar maximum when it's most active and solar minimum when its activity is at its lowest. Then there's our newest program to return humans to the moon, the Artemis program, a follow-up to NASA's Apollo that will stay on the moon for longer and for more complicated missions, all of which began in 2014. Space skeptics and other people who deny spaceflight have spent the last 12 plus years quote mining this one video out of context. A video talking about NASA's, at the time, next upcoming spacecraft, Orion. And during its first uncrewed orbital test flight, it would test its electrical systems, avionics, and eventually its heat shield as it returned to Earth at close to its return speed as if it would have returned from the moon. And skeptics love to show this video to me, but I saw this video before it landed in the feeds of space skeptics across the web, because I was there, in person, for the launch of Exploration Flight Test 1. And every time the launch experienced a hold or delay, NASA would play the same videos on loop to try and fill the dead air, so I saw it time and time again. So I'm very deeply familiar with the video. A video that, despite being 7 minutes long, they only ever show about a minute of it, depending on who clipped it. I've linked NASA's full video in the description, but let's focus on the parts skeptics always hone in on.
As we get further away from Earth, we'll pass through the Van Allen belts, an area of dangerous radiation. Radiation like this could harm the guidance systems, onboard computers, or other electronics on Orion. Naturally, we have to pass through this danger zone twice, once up and once back. But Orion has protection. Shielding will be put to the test as the vehicle cuts through the waves of radiation. Sensors aboard will record radiation levels for scientists to study. We must solve these challenges before we send people through this region of space.
Despite this mission from start to finish being labeled a flight test, skeptics seem to struggle to understand that fact. They love to quote,
"We must solve these challenges before we send people through this region of space,"
arguing it's proof we never went to the moon during Apollo. But not only have we shown that Gemini passed through just fine, but this quote is heavily misused. The entire video only speaks on Orion. It never mentions other flights. Literally no other space program or spacecraft is mentioned in this video. Not Apollo, not Gemini, Not the Space Shuttle, not Mercury, not Vostok, not Voskhod, not Soyuz, not Crew Dragon, not Starliner, not the X-15, not New Shepard, not Spaceship One, not Spaceship Two, not Shenzhou. Only Orion is mentioned or discussed. In fact, the video starts with the mission's focus stated clearly.
Before we can send astronauts into space on Orion, we have to test all of its systems. And there's only one way to know if we got it right. Fly it in space.
The whole mission is a test run to demonstrate and prove Orion could work. Another issue skeptics struggle to grasp, with the most common rebuttal being why not use what Apollo did, and to a degree, NASA has, given Orion is built on Apollo's success. However, as a new modern design, it also has new improvements and additions. One example being the use of hydrogen-bridged polymers and plastics along the capsule interior and hull. These polymers help reduce the total exposure received.
Radiation shielding, in many cases you want to put radiation shielding in front of you so that you can block the particles that are coming from outside. What you want to do is you want to absorb as much energy as possible. At the same time, you don't want to produce so many secondaries that make it through the shielding that you really cause more damage to the human being. So what can happen is if you put lead is not the material of choice. If you put lead in there, there's 282 nucleons, protons and neutrons, that can be struck by the charged particles coming through, and those things can scatter, and you end up with a bunch of other particles inside your vehicle that are now depositing energy in you, where you'd probably be better off with the single high energy particle going through you. So you have to be careful with shielding. It can help you and it can hurt you if you don't design it correctly. The radiation shielding on the Orion vehicle will be making use of the mass that is on board. So whatever mass that exists, you want to place it in the places where the vehicle is least shielded, and that way you're not carrying extra mass for no reason, because it's very expensive to launch the mass. And the kinds of materials that we're interested in using are things that we call low Z, or low number of nucleons, such as hydrogen, are the types of materials you're really interested in using to protect. Water is a very good shield charged particle radiation. Polyethylene is another type of material because it has a lot of hydrogen in it. It is not something that's easy to design with, and you can't use it as the hull of a vehicle. So while it's a good material for radiation protection, it may not be the best material for structural.
Skeptics fail to realize that these new vehicles are always tested before people are put in harm's way. Before a new plane flies passengers, it must perform flight tests. Before a new car is sold to market, it must be tested on the test track. Before a cruise ship can carry passengers, it must complete sea trials, and roller coasters have to run with simulated riders before they let people ride them. It's just normal practice to ensure a design is safe before putting people at risk, as heritage on proven design doesn't make it 100% reliable or safe, as failures with the 737 MAX and Starliner debacle have proven. So when he says,
"We must solve these challenges before we send people through this region of space,"
he's talking explicitly about Orion, as he had the previous 3 minutes and the following 3 minutes after, especially since this mission is wholly unique compared to Apollo, as unlike the Apollo missions to the moon, EFT didn't just zip through the belts, it took the long path through the dense regions. NASA effectively nuked Orion to test how effective its shielding was. Speaking of Orion's shielding, how well did it hold up? Did NASA demonstrate Orion could handle the belts? Did NASA solve those challenges? Turning to the data collected, Orion peaked at around 10 millisieverts, a dose just above what a normal full-body CT scan would be exposed to. So if humans had been on board Orion during this flight, they would have survived the radiation at least, proving and demonstrating that Orion was ready for its role of ferrying humans to the moon and back. But before Orion ever flew humans beyond Earth orbit, SpaceX sent humans beyond Earth orbit first, on Polaris Dawn in 2014. Launched on SpaceX's Falcon 9, the crew traveled the furthest distance away from Earth without going to the moon, the first of its kind mission since Apollo and Gemini 11. As its apogee was 870 miles, or 1,400 kilometers, it took the crew through the inner Van Allen belts. putting the private 4-member crew through the belt's radiation for the first time since Apollo 17 in 1972. But their pass wasn't just a waypoint, but a point of research. They had detectors actively measuring the radiation they were exposed to, reporting they experienced 4 millisieverts of radiation as a result of passing through the belt, well within survivable margins. After EFT-1, NASA finally launched their long-awaited uncrewed flight test, returning a crew vehicle to the moon, known as Artemis 1. It would test a nearly fully spec'd out Orion, with everything except life support and a full set of seats. It even included 2 mannequins, known as Helga and Zohar. Helga would be a naked reference for what a plain-clothed crew would be exposed to in terms of radiation while they made the trip to the moon and back. Zohar, however, wore a new astro-red vest, which would help protect future Artemis crews from the longer duration of exposure to deep space radiation. When Artemis 1 returned, a massive suite of data was collected, including radiation measurements as it made its way away from Earth through its brief pass of the belts to the moon, and the same process again in reverse to come back. Artemis 1 had a high-end exposure rate of 35.4 millisieverts throughout its 25-day journey to the moon and back, with 1.8 millisieverts and 3.94 millisieverts being attributed to the passes through the Van Allen belts, leaving around 29.6 millisieverts experienced during the rest of the trip, providing an average of around 1.16 millisieverts per day, a survivable dosage. Even if we include the Van Allen belt passes in the average, it only comes out to 1.38 millisieverts per day. And as to Artemis 2, which flew only 3 months ago as of the release of this video, the radiation data has not yet been released, and as it's still being processed. However, we have 4 healthy crew members who have been handling their return to Earth just fine. So that's all the relevant missions so far, but this discussion misses one person's comments on the situation, that being the perspective of Dr. Van Allen himself. Thanks to the rapidly progressive nature of spaceflight, he was not only alive to see the discovery of his hypothesized belts, but also see humans traverse it during Apollo, and even lived to see a Fox documentary spreading false claims that the belts would have been fatal. Dr. Van Allen said on the subject, "The claim that radiation exposure during the Apollo missions would have been fatal to the astronauts is only one example of such nonsense, something he would continue to affirm in future letters to him. But it's often said that every conspiracy has a tiny nugget of truth, and while this conspiracy has so far been entirely devoid of truth, I will throw the skeptics a bone and shift the focus to something factual. The skeptics have the position that the Van Allen belts are fatal to any humans who would try to pass through them. Around the Earth, this isn't the case, but if you go to the largest planetary body in our solar system, Jupiter, that is a different case. Van Allen belts, while largely discussed in reference to the Earth, are not unique to the Earth. Any planet with a sufficiently strong magnetic field will have one. That includes the massive planet of Jupiter, which due to its size and extremely strong magnetic field, results in an equally immense and intense Van Allen belt, with the inner belts potentially exposing a passing crew up to 100 sieverts, and possibly up to 10,000 sieverts. And to clarify, in this video we've largely been talking in millirads or millisieverts, or 1/1000th of a sievert. If exposure didn't kill you within the first hour, you absolutely would be dead shortly thereafter, especially given the massive size of the belts. Where it takes less than an hour to enter and exit Earth's belts, Jupiter's massive belts are a multi-hour experience. So that is what the skeptics are thinking of when they try to imagine an instantly fatal Van Allen belt, not around Earth, but Jupiter. But what can NASA do to protect astronauts from more practical issues of radiation around the Earth and Moon? This is the question NASA has been trying to answer for at least the last 2 decades, and has been the focus of much testing. As mentioned before, one new development is the creation of the astro-rad vest that astronauts can wear. The vest is made of extremely hydrogen-rich polymers, which help capture and stop potentially harmful radiation from reaching core organs in the body. This is something its bulky shape also helps to achieve, with thicker material in areas that have more sensitive organs. Another addition to help keep the crews safe is the deployment of over a dozen solar observation satellites, aimed at the sun, watching it, measuring every change it makes. This provides NASA with critical time-sensitive information about solar activity so they can warn the crew about potential incoming solar storms. And what they can do in response is another innovation on Orion, a radiation shelter crew can hide within if a higher level event were to occur. This shelter provides an additional radiation shielding. And to answer what household item is secretly holding a nuclear isotope, it's your smoke detector. Now, I did specify houses furnished before the 1990s, as a new model of smoke detector has entered homes that doesn't rely on the needed ions emitted by the americium-241 isotope that's stored within the detector. Now, some might wonder, isn't that dangerous? Why aren't we irradiated by the isotope? The answer is simple. It's emitting alpha radiation, which is almost entirely blocked by the plastic shell of the smoke detector. Alpha radiation, as mentioned previously, can be stopped by the skin, so what little escapes the detector's housing still cannot penetrate deep enough into the human body to cause harm. If you want additional details on how this model of ionization smoke detector works, Technology Connections made a video on them that I'll link below. Moving on. Radiation. Something we all live with and survive on a daily basis. But is it this instantly fatal field that kills on contact? No, it isn't. While radiation can be hazardous and even lethal at high intensities, the measured levels from space just aren't high enough to cause long-term harm over the short-term missions NASA has so far done beyond Earth orbit. And while some might want to argue that NASA lies, or that their data can't be trusted, one must realize that it's through NASA's work that we know the belts exist at all. And while people love to argue that the levels were sufficient to be fatal, no one has yet to present such measurements that astronauts have been through that should have been fatal. The Van Allen belts are one of many complications and indeed
challenges
that we had to overcome. And frankly, it's an insult to human ingenuity and perseverance. Humanity has overcome many obstacles people have seen as unbeatable at one time or another. Humans taking flight, climbing Everest, harnessing the power of the atom, and yes, even mankind reaching space. Humanity has never truly turned away from an engineering challenge. If the ocean pressure was too powerful, engineers and scientists developed new shapes to better survive the crushing pressures and materials that handle that load best. When humanity needed to survive in temperatures in excess of 1,000 degrees to fight fires, we developed and engineered firefighting suits capable of keeping people alive in those conditions. Radiation is no different. We performed tests, studied and conducted experiments to learn how materials responded to radiation and what yielded the best results to keep people alive. Our success in traveling to space was not a one-off lucky chance. It was the collaborative work and research of many, many people and missions to space long before Apollo 11. Research that is still ongoing today as we aim to make spaceflight even safer and to build the bridge from Earth to Mars and eventually the stars beyond.